Good day everyone, I am Donita Salbico and for today's video we are going to talk about evaluation and testing, its meaning, effects, and purpose. As we have tried to establish in the whole coursework, ESP is of utilitarian value to the learners who are undergoing a course for a purpose. The course sponsors who also know why they are sponsoring the course. As much is expected of ESP program, there must be a way of ascertaining when the learners have learned and whether the course is effective, achieving its goal. In the words of Hutchinson and Waters, 1987, ESP is accountable teaching. ESP learners and sponsors are investors in ESP course and they want to see a return of their investment of time and or money. The managers of the ESP course are accountable to these investors. This accountability has produced the demand for more and better evaluation procedures. Objectives. By the end of the unit, you should be able to define and explain the terms evaluation and testing, state some of the benefits of testing, state some of the effects of testing and assessment, describe communication testing, stating some of the features. So, what is testing, evaluation, and assessment? Evaluation is a process which begins with determining what information to gather and which ends with bringing about changes in current activities or future ones. This is according to Dudley Evans and St. John, 1998. It applies to both learners and courses. It makes use of quantitative methods, example tests, and qualitative methods, example interview and questionnaire. It can be formative or ongoing or summative and of course. Evaluating students' work, teachers' work, or course evaluation are the necessary parts of each learning and teaching process. Evaluation is not only a motivating factor, but it also shows the student's progress or effectiveness in the course, or on the other hand, it can disclose possible inadequacies that are not successfully covered. It also helps teacher to provide information whether he or she does a good job or not. Testing or assessment is a useful working instrument or a tool used by the teacher to assess the learners. It could also be defined as a pause at reasonable intervals to look back at how well the students are performing. There exist many types of tests. Questionnaires, tasks, or the evaluation can be done in the form of talk, discussions, or interviews. Other methods of assessing a child's work are by asking the child some question or taking a look at certain works performed by the child at his extra time, which falls under the assessment using interview. The test is perhaps the best way for learner assessment. Teacher finds if the content of course meets learner's expectation and whether the learner is able to dispose with the new information and employs learned skills in a particular situation. According to Hutchinson and Waters, 1992, this assessment takes on a greater importance in ESP because ESP is concerned with the ability to perform particular communicative tasks. It is really important that the learners would have sufficient knowledge about the English language in ESP as well as use that knowledge in communication because by displaying mastery and prowess in communication, it would largely tell about the effectiveness of the ESP course that the learner took up. Language testing. It is a complex activity tasking the teacher's ingenuity. It is the duty of the teacher to know the appropriate test materials for different language skills. In language testing, the teacher should prepare the appropriate test materials, ensuring that the materials would help improve the language skills of the students. Thus, teachers and ESP should possess ingenuity or the cleverness and the creativity to ensure that the students would have an amazing and worthwhile experience in the ESP classroom. The technique for assessing speech work and the type of assessment instrument may not be identical with the technique and type of assessment instrument you will require for assessing reading comprehension. In testing, the teachers should not rely on only the questions set by the textbook writers. Why? Because there are instances where the book that you used or the book that is being provided to the teachers in the ESP classroom may not exactly contain questions that are relevant and that directly ask the important questions needed for the learners to have new knowledge input, which critically plays a big part in the acquisition of language skills. You need to draw up your own questions and it must be well framed. You should utilize different questioning techniques and make your instructions as clear and ambiguous as possible. Backwash effect. According to use, it refers to the effect of testing on teaching and learning. Backwash is something which can be harmful or beneficial depending on the handling. It is harmful if the preparation dominates all teaching or learning activities and if the test content and testing techniques are at variance with the objectives of the course. A test should test the language skill it is intended to test. Multiple choice items should not be used to test writing skill. Situations like this result to harmful backwash, where the design of a test brings about beneficial changes in the syllabus and higher standard in English for students. It is a beneficial backwash. Multiple choice should not be used to test writing skills because this type of assessment will not show the writing ability of the students. In order to assess the writing skills of the students, the teacher can prepare an essay type of exam for the students to show their writing ability through sentence structure. Multiple choice could be used in terms of improving the vocabulary of the students, which is useful in improving the reading skill of that student. But for Davis, according to him, the good test is an obedient servant since it follows and apes the teaching. But Hughes disagrees. He sees the relationship between teaching and testing as that of partnership, meaning they go with one another. One is not superior with the other, but rather they support each other. Testing is not always a servant to teaching because there are occasions where teaching is good and appropriate and testing is not. And equally, there may be occasions when teaching is poor or inappropriate and testing is able to exert a beneficial influence. Testing should not always follow teaching, rather, it should be supportive of good teaching and where necessary, exert a corrective influence on bad teaching. There are many effects which testing can have on teaching and learning. It has significant influence on how a teacher works with the learners and also influences how learners learn. Purpose of testing. Information about people's language ability is often very useful and sometimes necessary. The type of test determines why it is needed. Proficiency test, placement test, etc. In the teaching systems, test measures the student's achievement in the second or foreign language. Tests also provide information about the achievement of groups of the learners, without which it is difficult to see how rational educational decisions can be made. Language testers should first of all be clear about the purpose of testing in a particular situation. This is because different purposes will usually require different kinds of tests. Hughes, 1989, identifies the different purposes of testing. First, to measure language proficiency regardless of any language courses that candidates may have followed. Second, to discover how far students have achieved the objectives of a course of study. It is to measure the progress of the students after all the lessons done in the ESP classroom. Third, to diagnose students' strengths and weaknesses to identify what they have learned and what they have not learned. I think this is observed in the formative assessment where a test is given prior to conducting lesson proper to determine the strengths and weaknesses of the students in order that the teacher will know on what topic he or she would start the class. And lastly, to assess placement of students by identifying the stage or part of a teaching program most appropriate to their ability. It could be summarized that tests and testing are of great benefit to the child or learner, the teacher, and to educational practices. I think that would be all, and thank you so much for listening.